2017 work session. Tonight we have two items on the agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you're required to fill out a public comment card. And if you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you must fill out an affidavit that you have authority of said organization. Please remember this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone, stating your name and address for the record. The public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Public comment will be heard at the beginning of update. So, Sudi, if you would please sound the first agenda item.
Our first item this evening is discussion of text amendments to Chapter 20, Noise Control. And I do have one public comment on that.
Okay. You would call the first speaker.
And that's Ms. Laura Bentley.
Hi, good evening. Laura Bentley, 2500 Bethany Church Road. First of all, I'd like to thank City Council and staff for supporting the education efforts of the Milton Equestrian Committee regarding the fireworks and horses issue. Typically, we are able to plan for loud and disturbing noises on the actual holiday. When it becomes unpredictable and ongoing is when we have the problems. So perhaps we could create some mechanism here tonight for recourse through this updated noise ordinance. Again, I'm not suggesting that we ban fireworks or guns or anything. I just would like to see some mechanism for our police officers when they're called and there's some sort of complaint for them to go to that location and have some reason to make it stop. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is that all public comment, Sudi?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you please call the item. I think you may have already called it, but
Miss Kathy Field.
Kathy, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Robin. Robin has prepared a comparison of our existing noise ordinance with that of our proposed noise ordinance. But before she comes up, though, I just want to acknowledge Taylor Stickles, who is sitting at the staff table with Robin. Taylor is our volunteer summer intern from Georgia State and helped Robin significantly on the redrafting of this ordinance. So I wanted to acknowledge his good work this summer for that.
Thank you, Taylor.
Okay, Rob.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is a very exciting topic. I know you've been waiting all day to listen to. So I'll try to make it as painless as possible. Basically, what we're asking you to look at is a total deletion of the existing noise ordinance as it stands. I've given you a copy of the existing ordinance if you wanted to familiarize yourself with it at some point. And then we were asked and tasked to come up with a new ordinance based on the fact that the existing ordinance is very difficult to administer and enforce and just very difficult all over. So we decided instead of trying to tweak it or fix it, just to basically throw it out and start over again. With that said, as Kathy said, Taylor helped with doing a lot of research of other jurisdictions, and lo and behold, I think I ran into the Charlotte-Mecklenburg ordinance, which happens to be our current chief's previous place of employment, so he was very familiar with it, and I was able to pick his brain about it as well. Just want to also let you know that we did have the community zoning information meeting. There was a draft at that meeting and nobody showed up. I'm sorry to say that, but we did work closely with the police department as well as we distributed to the Parks and Rec and other departments that might be impacted by it. As well as I worked closely with our city attorney And then last month, this item came before the Planning Commission. It's not a required ordinance because it's in the city code, but we always like to bring everything that we can to them because they have a great overview of what goes on, and the Planning Commission gives a lot of good input. So with that input, specifically, they asked us to look at fireworks and how it impacts the animals, as well as making sure that Kathy had the ability to give administrative variances to certain, well, I mean, just to have that ability to do that. And so what was presented to the Planning Commission last month was approved unanimously 6-0 with those comments for staff to further look into to prepare for your draft. With that said, let me just walk through the comparison between the existing ordinance and the proposed ordinance that you have in front of you. The existing ordinance in regards to general noise basically says not permitted based on the complicated source and receiving of sound. The proposed ordinance prohibits it when creating quote unquote unreasonably loud and disturbing noise with no minimum sound. There's another, the next item is sound impacting residential life. In the existing ordinance, the minimum dBA for residential and then modifications with complicated change in noise level and duration. It didn't really speak to residential life per se, but it did indicate zoning districts for residential. In the current proposed, it's any noise that negatively impacts residential life categorized by various uses with specific times not permitted. And let me just walk you through that a little bit. It's on page 2 of the draft of the ordinance, and it's a table. And if you go to 20-659A, it says, it shall be unlawful to carry on the following activities in any residentially zoned area of the city or within 300 feet of any residentially occupied structure in any zone of the city. So it's a little different than our previous ordinance in that it divides the type of operation of different types of machinery. So we have machinery by commercial users, construction machinery by individuals on their residential property, maintenance machinery by commercial, lawn maintenance machinery by commercial users, operation of lawn maintenance by individuals on their own property, as well as garage machinery, and then lastly, waste haulers. And then you'll see that there's different categories that it applies to, and I won't go into all the details. I will make the point that we try to make the individual operation of lawn and personal machinery as flexible as possible, because obviously we want to give everybody their time and opportunity to work in their own property and lawns. The last item to the right is operation of waste haulers, and you see that it's Monday through Sunday, 7:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. They are not allowed to operate. So you're like, well, why are they doing that every day? Well, currently in the waste ordinance, that is when the waste haulers are allowed to come, is every day between 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. So you just take the opposite. So that's an example of that. And then the next item is amplified sound. The current ordinance doesn't even address amplified sound. But again, we do another table on page 3, section 2660, amplified sound produced within all zoning districts. And I won't go through everyone, but you can see how we've broken them down by the amount of noise or the dBA, and depending on which day of the week. And then permits for additional amplification for residential or commercial. So this is, if you would happen to have a special occasion where you knew that you would need additional amplification for those areas, that they can apply for a permit. Same thing for outdoor amplification of music at commercial establishments and residentially used properties. Again, the existing ordinance didn't even get into this at all, and this is being addressed in this proposed ordinance. There's a chronic commercial noise that is addressed. So I think if when there are chronic situations where there's lots of noise and the police have asked them, repeatedly to deal with it and to stop, there is an avenue to work with that entity to try to get them in line. And then next was animals on page 7. Again, the existing ordinance doesn't directly address animals, but under our proposed one, we have 2 different issues that we're addressing, and that's a noise from animals that make noise for more than 15 minutes. That's a very shortened version of it, but basically barking, growling, all those things that animals can make for an amount of time. And we looked at other jurisdictions to see what their amount of time was, and it ranged from 10 to 20 minutes. So we kind of split the difference of what other jurisdictions' limit was. So that's specifically noises from animals. And the second part of that is on page 7B. It says, no person shall act in such a manner as to create noise or sounds that would knowingly cause animals significant distress. Such noise or sounds shall include, but not be limited to, shooting of firearms, use of any combustible or explosive composition, substance or combination of substances, racing of engines, and blasting music. So we were trying to address the issues that were brought up also at the Planning Commission as far as different types of noises that impact our equestrian community, as well as other different types of animals. And this has all been reviewed by the city attorney and been given suggestions. It's already in this draft regarding these. The next one is motor vehicles. Again, not addressed in the old one, but there's specific noises from motor vehicles not permitted. And then we just recently added consumer fireworks after the Planning Commission, after some days. And it states there shall be no consumer fireworks used between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9:59 a.m. on July 3rd and 4th until 11:59 p.m. and on December 31st until midnight and into January 1 ending at 1 a.m. So we tried to be cognizant of what the current fireworks laws were, but at the same time trying to help out the issues that we've had with the noise emanating from fireworks. The penalty is the same. Basically, if they will go to our municipal court, and it will be decided between the solicitor and ultimately the judge. Our municipal judge will can give the amount of their penalty. And lastly is variances. This variance did exist in the current or the old ordinance, but we just made it clearer what the community development director can give a variance. Typically in the past, Kathy has given variances in writing just administratively. For instance, if a large commercial development needed to do a very early pour of cement and they had to start at 4 a.m, you'd hear the trucks backing up and et cetera. Or we've had the school board ask if they could do a little bit more work later into the day or earlier in the morning to complete projects during the summer months. So again, not very much that we get those variance requests, but we try to be as helpful as possible within reason. So with that, if you have any questions for myself or Kathy or the city attorney or anybody else, we'll be happy to answer them. Yeah.
Okay, Karen?
It's my understanding that under current state law, we are not allowed to regulate fireworks pretty much in any form or fashion. And I had asked Steve and Sudi to pass out a copy of House Bill 419, which the House passed last year, which would give us the authority to subject fireworks to our noise ordinance. But it has not been passed. It's been passed by the House. It was passed overwhelmingly by the House. It has not been passed by the Senate yet. And I have asked that we prepare a resolution signed by the City Council to vote on at our next council meeting to ask the Senate to approve this House Bill 419, which everyone has a copy of, which would allow a lot more local control and would allow us to subject fireworks to our noise ordinance, which they currently are not. We can't do it. It's my understanding talking to our legislators.
Which to that point, we kind of ask you to Councilmember Thurman's point, with the proposed changes with the fireworks and things like that, are we legally able to do anything, or we need to get 419 that needs to be passed by the Senate to allow us?
Right. So the fireworks laws have been sort of evolving over the past couple of years. When this legislation first came out a number of years ago, maybe 3, it was a pure preemption where the General Assembly literally preempted everything. And of course, then they adjourned for the session, and of course, all the fireworks began, and it caused a lot of concern throughout a lot of jurisdictions where perhaps shooting fireworks till midnight was not appropriate. And so then the General Assembly reconvened, and they did, in fact, provide a couple of additional exceptions. One of those exceptions you'll see actually manifested in what Robin just went over, which is the Section 2664 that will prohibit the shooting of fireworks after 9 p.m., except on those holiday days. And that is, of course, specifically set forth in the state law that says you can shoot them otherwise until midnight or later unless the local jurisdiction prohibits it, which is exactly what the city of Milton is doing. In addition, when the General Assembly convened, they also allowed certain exceptions with respect to city and county-owned property. In other words, because until then, literally the takeaway was that people could go onto county or city parkland and shoot fireworks, and now that's been prohibited as well. So long as we prohibit it, which we would. So the bottom line is, Mr. Mayor, is yes, to the extent that we want to have additional authority, we need to incentivize the General Assembly to continue to tweak this law and give localities the ability to modify these restrictions in ways that meet the lifestyles of the jurisdictions that they are, because this is a preemption issue. The General Assembly has made it very clear they are preempting the area of fireworks except in these limited areas. So that's correct.
Okay, good. Anybody else have questions?
Robin, on that first chart that you, on page 2,
Yeah.
to help me understand it a little bit. So if it says applies, then those actions can't be done during those hours. So
Yeah.
Monday through Friday, 7:30 p.m. to a.m., you really can't do anything commercial or individuals on their own property.
That's correct. But
Involving
but you can
construction
work on
machinery.
Saturday.
Or lawn maintenance.
Lawn, because lawn
Right, right.
says applies to.
On the next page, doesn't it? Does it not give you?
Saves you Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays.
So on Sundays and federal holidays, you can't do it at all.
Anything commercially.
Any commercial, correct, yes.
And then on Sundays and federal holidays, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., individuals can't do anything
Let's see.
as far as on their own property.
Right, so I think the intent is that, we discussed this at Planning Commission, at least, we can tweak it. I guess during the week, we made it later in the day. We can always tweak those to be appropriate, whatever you all.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they're not appropriate.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand. It may be better, it may be helpful for just formatting purposes that table be in one.
Yeah, and then when
One-
it gets redone, it would be done.
Yeah. Okay, but I just want to make sure I understood what applies means. Thank you.
So, Robin, did we do any research, or did we, and the volume of noise complaints that we get today, what that volume is in an average month?
As far as complaints,
Right.
I do not know what that is from the police department.
We can get them from the police chief. There's different types, though.
Right. Well,
We
where
get
I was
out
going to
parties
go,
and things like
where I
that.
was going to go with my line of questioning is, do we think that changing the ordinance is going to change the volume of complaints that we get in a positive or negative direction? And do we think it's going to somehow improve the quality of the complaints? In other words, what I mean by that is reduce the number of false complaints, people that are complaining about noise when there isn't really a noise problem.
I'm going to take that if I could. Yes, on the second part. A lot of the issue we've had with the current noise ordinance is the flow chart. I wish I had the picture of how to follow through
Right.
with what applies. So what's been generally believed throughout the community is that you actually couldn't do any construction whatsoever after a certain time or on federal holidays or on Sundays, which of course it's not the case. It had to rise above a certain decibel level at the receiving property line, which is very difficult to enforce. So what we're looking to do is we're trying to create a simpler process, and not only process, but able to administer it in a manner which is clear to everybody involved. There's no ambiguity. Additionally, from an enforcement standpoint, it's much easier to understand this process as it is the other. There are things I still want to see, some minor changes I'm looking for in here, but it should simplify the entire process. It should reduce the number of, if we do a good enough job of communicating the new law, it should reduce the number of unfounded complaints, but it's also going to give us the ability to enforce the founded complaints.
Right.
That we may not be doing the best job on right now.
Okay. Probably the only other question that I've got, I mean, noise ordinances tend to fall in that category of ordinances where there's a lot of subjectivity that can be introduced. And so when we take language out of an ordinance that is very specific, and so we can apply objective criteria in, figuring out if a violation has occurred, we replace it with subjective criteria. It just sort of worries me. So when we say a noise of any volume or level for an extended period of time can create a potential violation, that seems to me like we're creating a really subjective criteria.
I agree with you on that, and that was also in the original ordinance. And that is one of the things I have highlighted to talk to Ken about. I'm a little concerned. One person's disturbance might not be another person's disturbance.
Right. And I only wanted to bring those up so that we can go back and maybe do some more research there and figure some things out. So I'm just happy to let you guys know how I'm thinking there. And when it comes up for discussion at a meeting, we can dig into the details.
Understandably.
Would it be fair to say that probably the most important item that's kind of brought up that we're looking into this is the fireworks issue? I know all council members, but Councilmember Thurman especially, and a lot of folks, we've had issues, in the equestrian side and all that. So assuming that we get the House bill gets approved and then we have some local control, would it be fair to say that would probably take care of most of our complaints or concerns? I know you're still going to have these other issues that's subjective and, we'll adjust them somewhat, but with the fireworks thing, we'll address that.
So the fireworks thing, it will address the when you can or should not expect fireworks from a time standpoint. However, it doesn't reduce the amount of days. So some of the complaints I've heard from some of the community is not necessarily, they understand it's only going to be on July 4th and maybe July 5th, and there are certain things they can do to mitigate, especially when it comes to horses. But when it becomes every night, or I don't know if there's sales after July 4th and all of a sudden it increases afterwards, I think that's part of the issue as well. What this will do is it'll give more predictability, at least as to when things will stop in the evening. But I agree with Councilman McDermott, if we could extend that, if the state would allow us more flexibility to be able to determine when fireworks can and cannot be used, it may give more predictability to our large animal owners.
That's one of the issues that's more Milton-centric than some of our neighboring cities.
Is the council okay with us carrying a resolution that we would have to vote on, obviously, the next council meeting, just in support to get the Senate to go ahead and approve this House Bill 419?
I'm okay with giving that direction.
That would just give us more
Negative on
local
that.
flexibility.
Right now, we don't have much local control. I mean, it's dictated at the state level, and we don't really get to make a whole lot of changes to it. But this would at least give us, to me, it doesn't go far enough, but it does give us at least a little local control. Like I said, this passed by the House overwhelmingly last year, made it 147 to 17 by the House, but the Senate never actually voted on it other than to table it. So
did they not support it, or did they just not rise to the?
I don't think it rose to a level of importance that they were willing to put it out there. The way it works with the House with these bills, it's on a 2-year cycle, so this bill is still active. It has still been passed by the House, so we would just need the Senate to approve it in this next session.
Okay. Any other questions, Rick?
Yeah, just a question, and Bert kind of hit on this already. In our current noise ordinance, does it prohibit homeowners from operating their lawnmowers after 7:30 p.m.?
I would have
Is
to
that
look.
a new restriction where it says?
I'd have to look at the timing of it.
Looks like you can.
I did want to make a note. I do believe, and I apologize for not indicating, I do believe the Planning Commission wanted a little bit later for the personal use, so I would like to look back at my notes.
Okay.
It was either 8:30 or 9 to use for personal lawn mowers and for personal machines. So I would.
Makes sense in the summertime, especially.
Most of the time, we're going to be using that. I think you would want to allow it a little bit later.
There was definitely more flexibility, and there's some other things we need to
So
look
yeah,
at.
it's currently it's between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7:30 a.m. So it went all the way to 10 p.m. that you could use your lawnmower, and I think that's a bit long.
But this one says 7:30
Right, and I'd be happy to
7:30
amend
p.m.
that, because I do believe that was an oversight on my part, that they did want to have a longer time period for the personal use.
Okay.
I can make that
I
correction.
would agree with that. I think the other night it was.
I'm sorry, what?
I would agree. I think the other night it was 9 o'clock before I got finished mowing.
Yeah, exactly.
The operation of garage machinery, is that mechanical?
Correct.
commercial?
I mean, that's like, let's see, operation of garage machinery. I mean, that's generally, I did not make that whether it was for commercial or for personal.
I can help you on that. It's machine or tools powered by electricity, fuel, or by hand that is used in maintaining or building various types of automotive items, such as engines of all types, car or truck chassis.
So it would
But
apply
by
to
garage, it's like an automotive garage, not like we think of as our home garage.
Right. But I think it could apply if you had your home mechanic out there with all their tools and power stuff, and they go past a certain time, that would be a legitimate complaint, so.
But and that would just be with the noise, the decibels from those actions, correct? Like, for example, you may have somebody that works on their car and wants to work late at night, but as long as their door's shut and there's
Correct,
no noise.
exactly. If they have their
No
door
noise
open
coming
and
out,
the
right.
whole world hears, that's when it would apply, yes.
I would just ask you to look at that, then the way it's written, because if I read it literally here, it says.
Oh, not, I'm sorry.
Operation of garage machinery is prohibited Monday through
You're right.
Friday
I'm
from
sorry.
7:30 p.m. So if I want to work on as long as I'm not disturbing my neighbor, it says I can't do anything during that time.
Between
I don't
it,
think
you're
you want to
correct.
get any
I'm sorry. I'm
legislation
thinking
out.
of the other ordinance, the
Okay.
previous one is
Okay.
based on sounds. You're correct.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Sudi, do we have any public comment for item number 2?
We have 4.
You have 4?
Yes.
Okay. And Ken, I'm going to ask you too on these as our parliamentarian, just make sure that we follow the rules of decorum. If I miss something, either the council or yourself, please call me on it. And we do have 10 minutes, 2 minutes per person. So
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
that?
2 minutes.
2 minutes per person. Correct.
And this item is council discussion regarding possible response to redistricting news stories. And Mr. Tim Becker is our first speaker.
Tim Becker, 15625 Canterbury Chase, Milton, Georgia. I'm speaking tonight with regards to the redistricting. The issue is simple here. The boundaries of District 1 got changed so that a council member could keep her seat when she moved. Furthermore, this change was effected in a clandestine way to minimize public scrutiny. I want to remind council that our charter is our Constitution. It establishes the structure and foundation of our government. How is it that Milton's charter got changed without a single citizen knowing about it? Not one. How can the city defend that? It cannot. How is it that this district change was never on a council agenda? It was never discussed and debated. There was no approval from council. Why is it that Jan Jones asked for an official letter and instead the bill was submitted with no documented support from council? Nearly every principle of good governance was violated. This change was non-transparent, it was non-deliberative, it was unfair, it was undemocratic, it was non-participatory, and it was lacking in rigor. Why did this happen? Because a council member wanted to keep her seat. I have a question. What is the address that's mentioned in the January 27th email from Gina Wright? Because the impetus for this was mentioned as being a specific address. This was not routine or minor. Some people have said that. There should have been a special election. This seat should have been relinquished. By it not being relinquished, we have disenfranchised.
Your 2 minutes has expired.
Mayor, I want the opportunity to continue to speak.
Excuse me, Mr. Becker. I'll be allowed, I'll, as usual, I'll ask the council if they're okay. If not, we'll stick with the rules of 2 minutes. Council, any opinion on that?
We'll stay with the rules.
I'm okay giving citizens as much time as they want to talk.
Okay, right, okay. Right,
That's kind of what we've done in the past.
that's what we've done in the past time. You guys?
I don't think we got to give citizens as much time as they want to talk, but if they want to finish up a comment, then that's fine. And then I would like to make some comments
Okay,
to clarify some of his questions.
all right. If the council's okay, I'll agree to add a minute to that. Council okay with that? Okay, Mr. Becker.
Thank you, Council. With this district change, 7,000 people were denied the opportunity to run. The most important aspect of this is an erosion of public trust. This is the kind of thing that makes people cynical about government. It's the kind of thing that makes people mistrust government. And I don't believe this malarkey about representing the citizens of the estates at Atlanta National. All voters vote for all 6 council members, and therefore all 6 council members represent all voters. You do not have to change district lines to represent a single voter here in Milton. So I want to ask council a few questions in closing. What is appropriate for a council? Is it appropriate for a council member to change the charter without working through council? What are the lessons that you've learned from this? What changes are you going to make? How are you going to restore the public trust? I believe that there needs to
Your 1 minute has expired.
Third-party investigation.
I'm gonna have to call you time,
Okay.
Mr. Becker.
And I think Ms. Thurman needs to conduct
Thank
a
you.
town hall
I'm
meeting.
going to ask you to not mention names. Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to, he asked some very specific comments, and I feel like I have the right to answer the comments that he, to answer the questions that he did. The address that was,
One second, Councilmember Thurman, just want to ask.
Well, what I would recommend, obviously, the council is going to have the opportunity to debate, to discuss this agenda item. I would recommend, just to keep with our protocol, that we allow the public comments and then, obviously, the council is going to have a full opportunity to address all of
Are you
this.
okay with that, Councilmember Thurman?
not really, but, you know, I mean, it's the majority to me. If you're accused of something, you ought to be able to respond immediately to those accusations, and that's what he's done. He stated some factually inaccurate information, and I feel like that, you know, waiting until three more people speak in order to answer it is not appropriate, but, you know.
Okay, well, I'd like the procedure, go ahead unless the council, and all due respect, unless the council wants to override me on that, and finish public comment, and then we can discuss. Okay, so you can please call the next.
Our next speaker is Mr. David Damiani.
Hello, David Damiani. I reside at 935 Post Oak Close, Milton. I want to first congratulate you all on this amazing development you've put together here. It's my first time here, and the chambers are absolutely stunning and beautiful, and I'm really impressed with what you all have done. And for a group that can do so much, you can imagine my surprise when I read that article last week at how sloppy that seemingly innocent act of changing the districts was handled last week. And I'm merely one person here that is represented by the comments Mr. Becker made with respect to the cynicism that is running through our community right now when you take something that should have been done more transparently and was done under the cover of darkness or the cloak of secrecy. And I'm not here to accuse anyone or suggest that anything nefarious was intended behind this, but the reality is, again, we take something so innocent and you make it such that it looks like there's a perceived act of perhaps dishonesty or some ethics issues here. It creates problems for our community. Because frankly, I don't care who represents me in my district. As Mr. Becker said, we have you all here that represent us at large. So it really, frankly speaking, I don't even know why we have districts. It's somewhat silly. But I'm really concerned here because something was done that was against the city charter. And that makes us look really goofy, for lack of better words, in the Milton community. I don't know, when I read that article, and if you can believe the veracity of it, which I'm going to assume for the minute that I'm giving the benefit of the doubt that the facts were in fact checked, and this is not another example of fake news, that y'all knew about this, and some of y'all knew after the fact, some of you knew before the fact. I just want y'all to think differently on a go-forward basis, and I would like us to look into this a little deeper and learn more facts. As Ms. Thurman said, she would be willing to address in a few minutes here, and talk about how we as a community can start to hold ourselves up to a higher standard. Thank you.
Thank you. So you can please call the next speaker.
Next speaker is Mr. Vincent Taylor.
Good evening. Vincent Taylor, 15670 Canterbury Chase in Milton. I'd just like to say a couple of things. I haven't been to a council swearing-in ceremony, but I believe the council members are sworn to represent the interests of the city and the citizens above their own. And I'm a bit disappointed, to say the least, that somebody has acted in their own interests above the city's, and anyone who violates their oath of office should resign. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So you can please call the next speaker.
Our last speaker this evening is Laura Bentley.
Laura Bentley, 2500 Bethany Church Road. I expect and our citizens deserve end-to-end transparency in all aspects of our government. We expect public notification, quorum of council, and the opportunity for public comment. Community trust has been breached, and I would suggest that rather than responding to a news article, you respond to your constituents by assuring them that district lines are not fluid and changeable by as few as 2 council members. and that policies have been immediately implemented to prohibit this sort of breach from ever occurring again. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all public comment, Judy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll open up this item. I know, Ken, your name's on there, but I think Councilmember Coates had brought this up, so I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, what happened was I get a tweet from social media from a resident that asked if the city was going to issue a response on this, and I just asked, I don't know, let me find out. And so I called Steve to see if that was something that we might want to do, and he asked all of us and brought a force together so that we could have this conversation. So in a nutshell, that was it. But Ken, you had some comments you wanted to make as well.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I mean, this is a topic where the council put this on the agenda. It's now heard public comment on it. I know that Councilmember Thurman wishes to address it. What you choose to do with this is fully up to the council. You could choose to sit up here and debate this, or you can choose to not.
Okay.
But that is up to you.
Okay. I'll open up for comment from Councilmember Thurman.
Make
a statement.
I would like to make several statements. Number one, the address given was the address of the clubhouse because I had no address at my current house at that time. You don't get an address till you get a building permit, and there was no building permit that had been issued. So I had no address. I had a lot number, but no address. So, you know, you're looking for the negative. You're looking for that. You're so full of hatred and bullying and negativity that, you know, it's just you're the one that's made such an issue of this. This was not against the city charter. This was not against the city charter. The legislators change the city charter on a regular basis. Excuse me, if you wanted to speak, you could come speak in public comment. So
I would like to ask Councilmember Thurman, to the public to keep the comment down, and if you could make your comments, Councilmember Thurman.
Everyone that was affected by this was just the council members because they were the only ones that really, it didn't change how a single person in the city voted. And that was something that the newspaper assured me they were going to make a really point of that, and they failed to do that. It did not change how a single person voted. I had not moved. I had not broken ground. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do with the lot. I wasn't even sure we're going to be able to build a house on the lot. I had actually mentioned to Representative Jan Jones a year and a half to 2 years before that I was representing this subdivision primarily, and I was spending a lot of time doing it. Chris Lagerblum can attest to that. I actually gave the newspaper reporter some email exchanges where it showed that I was the one that was spending a significant amount of time dealing with a certain house in the subdivision. And so, you know, I mean, somebody is trying to make this into something a whole lot bigger than it is. The city manager knew about it. All city council members knew about it. I hadn't moved. I hadn't decided if I was going to even move there. I didn't have to move.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Man.
Excuse me, from the audience.
Yeah.
Point of order.
Okay, let's not get into debate back. Councilmember Thurman.
I had not decided if I was going to move there or not. I had not decided what I was going to do with the lot. You know, I had no building permit. I had no construction contract. None of that had taken place. So, you know, you make it sound like I had moved and then asked for, you know, the lines to be changed so I could keep my seat. That wasn't what happened. I didn't have to move. I still own my house in the other subdivision. So I could have stayed right there. I mean, it wasn't like I was required to move or had made a final decision. We weren't even sure what we were going to do. We weren't sure if we were going to build a house for us, if we were going to build a house for the, and sell it. We weren't even sure if that lot was buildable, to be honest with you. And you look at the email exchange, you can see that's the truth. We weren't even sure that the lot was going to be buildable. So, you know, the reason why I had done this wasn't because of this. It was because I was spending a significant amount of time, a lot of times on Friday or Saturday nights when I was over at the club, people would pull me aside and say, you know, what's happening with this? What's happening with the city? What's going on? Because I was there. The two subdivisions were so closely tied that the people were asking me the questions and I was spending the time. They weren't calling the people that were in the district too. They were calling and emailing me. And so that was why I had originally asked for it. You can believe whatever you want to. You can believe, I know some of y'all have got this negativity thing and this bullying, and you can believe whatever you want to, but I'm telling you the truth. And if if that was the only reason I was doing it, then I might have gone ahead and started building beforehand. I had no building permit, no construction contract, nothing prior to bringing this up. And I had actually brought this up to Representative Jones a year and a half prior, before I'd ever even thought of purchasing a lot over there. To be honest with you, when we purchased a lot, the information we received said it was an acre and a half lot, and I found out that the minimum lot size in the subdivision was 2 acres. I wasn't even sure the lot was going to be buildable. Fortunately, the lot really was 2 acres. Fulton County has every lot on my street listed incorrectly as far as the lot size. No surprise there. The Fulton County tax assessor doesn't have the right information on the lot size. But I mean, I wasn't even sure that it was going to be a buildable lot at the time we purchased it. And, all changes to districts had always been made by the legislature. City council can't make those changes. They've always been made by the legislature. And that's how it was done, to be consistent with what it had always been done. Everyone here knew about the change beforehand. This was not against the city charter, regardless of what somebody tells you. And there was no violation of oath of office. And Mr. Becker has given this list of all these questions. On June 15th, I asked to meet with Mr. Becker to answer all of his questions. I specifically said, can we meet in person so that I can answer all of your questions? And I said, I am more than happy to meet with you at City Hall to answer these and any additional questions you might have. I said, Steve Crowcoke will meet with us. Jan Jones is welcome to attend if she would like to. Please let me know some days and times that work for you. Tim's comment to me was, Karen, thanks again for your willingness to answer my questions. I only have the 5 questions and they are straightforward, so no meeting is necessary. I tried to meet with him. I tried to get all this answered up front. He refused to meet with me. I'm sorry, I can't make someone who refuses to meet with me. I answered all his questions. He said that was all he had. Thank you. And then now he gives us a list of another 11 questions that he is demanding answers to, and another town hall meeting. You know what? You had the opportunity. I was happy to meet with you. You refused to meet with me. And the paper has printed several things that were inaccurate. It looks like Tim Becker almost wrote the article in the paper, and that's why we may need to send something in. The paper had said that they were going to make sure that it was paramount in there, that there was absolutely no change in how anyone voted. That was not paramount in there. There was no mention of who this Milton Coalition is, this top secret group, and what their motive was to influence the election, which clearly they say that their motive is to influence the election. So this was clearly something done for political purposes, and that wasn't brought out by the paper. My comments were not even brought up till the very end of the article. They basically let him make all the comments up front, and then me down at the very end, I get to throw in they quoted me in a comment or two. It said that the address was not given. They didn't even ask me for the address. If they'd asked me, I would have given them the address. It's the address of the clubhouse, 350 Tournament Players Drive. I didn't have a motive to move. I didn't have to move. I had no building permit. I had not done anything until well after the bill was passed, and we decided that it was a buildable lot. It took a lot to get it buildable, but it was a buildable lot. And I was told I was not allowed to submit a letter to the editor last week, and that if a letter was submitted to the editor, it could be no more than 500 words. But yet they allow Mr. Becker to submit comments that are over 750 words.
We may want to. Well, I just fear that we're calling out citizens' names.
Right.
Well, he's throwing out my names, and he's the one that wrote the letter. So
it's challenging for us to enforce rules for our citizens. We just need to try and
if you don't mind, just move forward if you could keep from mentioning names.
I was told that I wasn't allowed to write a letter to the editor, yet that others were allowed to write comments that were attached to the article. And I was told if I wrote a letter, it would only be published the week afterwards, and that it had to be 500 words. Others were allowed to write comments that were significantly longer than that. So I think we got a problem with the paper. This is a paper that has become more about making news than it is about actually reporting factual news. Fake news is unfortunately, fake news is a term we hear way too often these days.
Would ask the audience to please keep it down.
So, unfortunately, when papers decide they're going to try to steer articles, steer conversations, steer elections, sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. Clearly, a lot of them tried to steer the last presidential election and were not successful. But, it's really a shame, and I have a problem with us paying city money to a paper that is becoming more of a tabloid.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments or on the side? I'd like to just say, again, moving forward in the future, if, you can direct us in the proper procedures if there, if we do have a change or something that we want to recommend, but just guide us in the proper procedures and make sure we're all good.
Were you aware of the change? Because I know the former city manager was very aware of the change.
The change to what, Councilmember?
The change in the district.
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, the city manager was very much aware of the change, and he's copied on all the emails that they have copies of, so.
I understand.
We'll make sure in the future that you're copied in for legal advice.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Well, I guess the actual agenda item is, are we going to respond to the inaccurate stuff that they have put out there? I mean, isn't that what the agenda item actually is?
Excuse me, sir. I'm on a point of order. Ken?
I didn't call out his name, so.
You referred to passing stock out here that was.
Could we discuss this after the meeting and no due respect? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll open up the agenda item.
So this is a work session. Right. This isn't a meeting. We can't take any votes.
Right. Substantive votes.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So are we expecting to give the city staff some direction in this particular regard?
That would typically be the case at a work session. You all would discuss it and debate it. And again, if you want to get into a news article like that, you would have to identify amongst yourself any inaccuracies in it and decide what the cities, as manifested by 4 of you, what your position is with respect to a response. Yes, sir. And that would start the process of drafting it, which would then have to be circulated to you.
Well, when asked if this should be on the council's agenda for today's meeting, I specifically stated that I didn't have a problem discussing anything, because the day we're afraid to discuss something is the day we lose, okay? But I didn't think that the idea of an action from the city staff's point of view to the paper made any sense whatsoever, okay? Articles like this are populated with information that to a certain extent becomes based on remembrance and opinion. So I know that everything that I was asked when the paper called me up, I led with, to the best of my knowledge or based on what I remember, this is what I think. And so we're not going to be able to argue what the content of the article is all about, because it gets covered under those 2 concepts. Either that's what the person who said it thought, or that's what the person who said its opinion is. And so I don't see how we can argue with that. Now, if there were factual errors where we said X, Y, or Z happened on so-and-so date or such and such time, and that was not correct, well, that's something that the paper needs to take up with the individuals who are quoted in the article. The city didn't ask for the article to be written. The paper called up the individuals that were quoted, and so therefore the individuals have to respond to that. Other than you, Ken, I don't think any city staff were quoted in the article. And I'm pretty sure the comment you made that got quoted was 100% accurate. So I don't think that it makes any sense for us to take any type of action. Now, in terms of the subject matter itself, my responsibility in this whole thing, and this isn't about the city council. Well, this is about everything, so I shouldn't say anything like that. But my responsibility was understanding what was being told to us at a particular point in time, not responding by saying we should discuss this at a meeting. So I'll take responsibility for my lack of action in terms of pointing out that any discussion about a district or the changing of a district should have been done in an open meeting. I don't really have a defense other than at the time I was clueless. Well, please.
Hold down your
time. I was unaware of what the appropriate action was. I certainly knew that the city council can't manage its own district lines. I knew that for a fact. And unless Ken, you want to straighten me out on that?
No, that's generally true. There are some very limited exceptions that are not applicable here, so that's correct.
So to me, there wasn't any issue with the request because I knew for a fact that the state legislature had to weigh in on this subject. Now, whatever. Me going forward in the future, if something like this were to happen again, I would state that we needed to bring this forward to an open meeting and make sure that we got public comment on that. So those are the comments that I have on this. Like I said, I don't think that the city staff or the council can take any action here.
And I would think, excuse me, we're on the same page as far as that's what I had said in the future. Certainly need to communicate with the city attorney on the proper procedure, but go ahead.
Looking back, I wish we'd brought this all out to the public, let the public hear all about it, because there was nothing to hide, so I wish we had done that. When we did, when the legislator decided they were going to go from 6 districts down to 3 districts, and it was on our agenda, we had no comments about it, really. So, this is obviously a politically motivated thing. There were when we went from 6 districts to 3 districts and totally changed all the district lines, there were no comments. Why now? I mean, looking back, yes, I wish we had brought all this out. Everybody could have talked about it, because I'm sure nobody probably would have even shown up, and there was nothing. I mean, like I said, I had no building permit. I had no contract to build a house. Wasn't even sure what I was going to do with the lot. So, I wish I'd brought all this forward to make sure that everybody had no reason at all to question my integrity.
Okay. Councilmember Pitts.
Ken, just a quick question. The state legislature handles district lines all the time, right?
Yes.
In fact, in 4 years, they're going to be doing it all over again. There was a situation I know where even State Senator Brandon Beach was drawn into Chip Rogers' district because they thought he'd have no chance running against Chip Rogers. And that's what they do. They do that all the time. So is it fair to say that any resident at all can make a request to the state legislature with regards to district lines?
Well,
I mean, you can make a request, but...
Yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, that anybody can ask the General Assembly to do anything at any time. And of course, the General Assembly has almost plenary authority over the district boundaries of you, because the city is a creation of the General Assembly, of course. Now, whether the General Assembly will act upon that is another matter altogether. But certainly requests for legislation can be made at any time by anybody, yes.
Well, that's within their purview as regards to their representation in their capacity to the electorate upon their election, right? That's in their powers. So on this case, I don't see anything different than we had a resident that was making a request with a state legislator that actually had done their due diligence.
Keep it down.
On our end, from that perspective, while we also did our city charter too, we can do it as a body. Anybody can make that request as far as it goes. I just want to make sure that that's understood. But that doesn't necessarily mean, like you said, the state legislator will have to do what anybody says. They just make that decision, and then they just go do it. That's their aspect of the law. So I'm trying, as I look at this, I think that, yeah, we definitely want to be transparent. I wish that we had on this end.
Good.
I think we all do.
Nothing to hide. So.
But I don't think it was an act of, subversion or something. I think it was just knowing the process the way it was, and we just did that. So I think we've learned the lesson as far as this goes. We can move forward, but from that perspective, it's really a state legislator and the state laws that allow for this to even happen. So the state lawyers had no problems with that. Our city attorneys had no problems with this. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, the law was broken.
Well, I've not heard that really being suggested, that the law was, broken. That's not what I'm hearing. I don't believe that to be the case. To the extent that a request has been made, the General Assembly acts, that's within their purview to do, is
right.
The point that you're making. But so I do understand that point. Yes.
Okay.
With that.
Well, I just want to make sure that was, there. But as far as the article goes, people write articles, you're down, they want to pile on it, you're up, they want to say you're the greatest in the world. That's newspapers are in the business of selling advertising, and that's what they do. So on this end, I don't think we necessarily need to write a response. We can, but I think that, I'm not sure of the effectiveness of it really, because I think the question is really one of the state perspective, and I think our doing so we just basically put it back on them. So, in my mind.
Okay. Anybody else, Rick?
Yeah, I guess as far as the topic that's actually on the agenda, we brought this up before when we've had articles that have been written, and we think that there are inaccuracies. And I recall, Ken, we even had one of those meetings. If the city was misrepresented, when a city person, let's say it quotes the city and stating the city said this, then I think it's appropriate if we have a city director or someone that's misquoted and they're not correct facts, then maybe we need to do clarification. When it has to do with remembrances or interpretations, for the city to respond, I don't know if that's appropriate to do a formal response. As far as going forward, we know the process is the state legislature is the one that actually changes the district lines. And generally, at least my understanding, that rarely happens. It did happen, I know, a couple of times when you have changes in population or whatever, because we have to have balanced population between the different districts. So
now you're talking about reapportionment.
Right.
I understand.
So those lines will change. We had something similar to where Bethany Creek North and South were in two different districts, yet they were one subdivision. That was changed subsequently. When changes were made, they realigned that. So I think what I heard when people call and ask me questions about is, going forward, how are we going to handle this? This is past, and I think we've kind of talked about it. But going forward, it normally is not going to come from the council direction. There may be specific reasons why, but I think we could alleviate that just by doing, if we're going to have something like that, advertise it. If the state decides to make it district changes, we could make our citizens aware that their district lines have changed. Here's what the state has done, because that is going to happen in the future. We will have changes that would be made, and I guess that's one thing is going forward. But this specific item, I don't know what response we would specifically say as a city council or the city itself in responding back to the article.
Anybody else?
I'm in agreement that I don't think we need to make a response as a city. I think we've learned going forward just to be as transparent and open as possible. We've always talked about, can you use the belt and suspenders phrase? We can do that going forward. I would encourage Karen to write a letter to the editor. So you're
maybe they'll let me write one more than 500 words.
Well,
So.
I can't control that, but I think we've learned and we move forward and move on.
And I would agree. I don't think it's the city's position to make a statement. Individuals can make a statement to the paper. You can argue back and forth all day long, and I don't think you're going to get anywhere. So I would, if individuals would like to, I believe we are already moving forward, as I stated in the beginning, as well as other council members, that, moving forward, we want to be more perceptive to any issues. And we've already changed our procedures in the sense that last time the charter changes were through, they came back forward. We discussed them in a public meeting before just to give our blessing. So I think we need to be mindful to do that in the future. So anybody else?
Yeah.
Councilmember Thurman?
Yeah, I don't think we need to write a letter to any kind of comments to the paper from the city as its own. I will take care of writing my own comments and making sure that the stuff that was misstated from me is correctly or misstated or else twisted is there. My primary question, and I have voiced this to Steve and to Ken, is do we need to look at who we use for some of our advertisements and everything. I just think that, we need to look to see what kind of paper. I know the legislature right now is looking to see if they can change the laws now that there's not that much paper printed out there and have it all be done electronically. I hope that they will do that so that all the legal notices will be electronically. They will not be paper notices, which will actually save the city a significant amount of money. But as far as the city writing a letter, I don't think the city needs to write a letter. I will take care of writing anything myself that needs to be written.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Then that'll conclude this work session. Thank you. Thanks.
No. He's a mean, hateful person.
Go ahead.
Argument, Stacy. Starting over again? Okay.